Chapter 2. The Seven Hermetic Principles. The principle of truth are seven. He who knows these understandingly possesses the magic key before whose touch all the doors of the temple fly open. The Kybalion. The seven Hermetic principles upon which the entire Hermetic philosophy is based are as follows. 1. The principle of mentalism. 2. The principle of correspondence. 3. The principle of vibration. 4. The principle of polarity. 5. The principle of rhythm. 6. The principle of cause and effect. 7. The principle of gender. These seven principles will be discussed and explained as we proceed with the lessons. A short explanation of each, however, may as well be given at this point. 1. The principle of mentalism. The all is mind. The universe is mental. The Kybalion. This principle embodies the truth that all is mind. It explains that the all, which is the substantial reality underlying all of the outward manifestations and appearances which we know under the terms as the mental universe, the phenomena of life, matter, energy, and in short, all that which is apparent to our material senses, is spirit, which in itself is unknowable and undefinable, but which may be considered and thought of as a universal, infinite, living mind. It also explains that all the phenomenal world or universe is simply a mental creation of the all, subject to the laws of the created things, and that the universe as a whole and its parts or units has its existence in the mind of the all, in which mind we and move and have our being. The principle, by establishing the mental nature of our universe, easily explains all the varied mental and psychic phenomena that occupy such a large portion of the public attention, and which, without such explanation, are non-understandable and defy scientific treatment. An understanding of this great Hermetic principle of mentalism enables the individual to readily grasp the laws of the mental universe and to apply the same to his well-being and advancement. The Hermetic student is enabled to apply intelligently the great mental laws instead of using them in a haphazard manner. With the master key in his possession, the student may unlock the many doors of the mental and psychic temple of knowledge and enter the same freely and intelligently. This principle explains the true nature of energy, power, and matter, and why and how all these things are subordinate to the mastery of mind. One of the old Hermetic masters wrote long ages ago, He who grasps the mental nature of the universe is well advanced on the path to mastery. And these words are as true today as at the time they were first written. Without this master key, mastery is impossible, and the student knocks in vain at the many doors of the temple. 2. The principle of correspondence. As above, so below. As below, so above. The Kybalion. This principle embodies the truth that there is always a correspondence between the laws and phenomena of the various planes of being and life. The old Hermetic axiom ran in these words: as above, so below; as below, so above. And the grasping of these principles gives one the means of solving many dark paradoxes and hidden secrets of nature. There are planes beyond our knowing, but when we apply the Hermetic correspondence to them, we are able to understand much that which would otherwise be unknowable to us. This principle is the universal application and manifestation on the various planes of the material, mental, and spiritual universe. It is a universal law. The ancient Hermeticists considered this principle as one of the most important mental instruments by which man is able to pry aside the obstacle which hid from view the unknown. Its use even tore aside the veil of Isis to the extent that a glimpse of the face of the goddess might be caught, just as the knowledge of the principles of geometry enables man to preserve distant suns, their movements, while seated in his observatory, so a knowledge of the principle of correspondence enables man to reason intelligently from the known to the unknown. Studying the nomad, he understands the archangel. 3. The principle of vibration. Nothing rests. Everything moves. Everything vibrates. The Kybalion. This principle embodies your truth that everything is in motion, everything vibrates, nothing is at rest. Facts which modern science endorses and which new scientific discovery tends to verify. And yet this Hermetic principle was enunciated thousands of years ago. Excuse me. By the masters of ancient Egypt. This principle explains that the differences between manifestations of matter, energy, mind, and even spirit result largely in a various rates of vibration, from the all, which is pure spirit, down to the grossest forms of matter. All is in vibration. The higher the vibration, the higher the position in the scale. The vibration of the spirit is at such an infinite rate of intensity and rapidly that it is practically at rest, just as a rapidly moving wheel seems to be motionless. And at the other end of the scale, there are gross forms of matter whose vibrations are so low as they seem to be at rest. Between these poles, there are millions upon millions of various degrees of vibration, from corpuscle to atom, electron to atom to molecule to world and universe. Everything is in vibratory motion. This is also true on the planes of energy and force, which are but varying degrees of vibration, and also on the mental planes whose states depend upon vibration, and even on to the spiritual planes. An understanding of this principle with the appropriate formulas enables Hermetic students to control their own mental vibrations as well as those of others. The masters also apply this principle to the conquering of natural phenomena in various ways. He who understands the principle of vibration has grasped the scepter of power, says one of the old writers. Everything is dual. The principle of polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has two poles. Everything has its opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meets. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. The Kybalion. This principle embodies the truth that everything is dual. Everything has two poles. Everything has its pair of opposites, all of which were old Hermetic axioms. It explains the old paradoxes of that perplex so that many which have been stated as follows. Thesis and antithesis are identical in nature, but different in degree. Opposites are the same, different only in degree. The pairs of opposites may be reconciled. Extremes meets. Everything is and isn't at the same time. All truths are but half-truths. Every truth is half false. There are two sides to everything, etc., etc., etc. It explains that in everything there are two poles, or opposite aspects, and that opposites are really only the two extremes of the same thing, with many varying degrees between them. To illustrate, heat and cold, although opposites, are really the same thing, the difference consisting merely of degrees of the same thing. Look at your thermometer and see if you can discover where heat terminates and cold begins. There is no such thing as absolute heat or absolute cold. The two terms heat and cold simply indicate varied degrees of the same thing, and that same thing which manifests as heat and cold is merely a form of variety and rate of vibration. So heat and cold are simply the two poles of that which we call heat, and the phenomena attended upon which manifestations of the principle of polarity. The same principle manifests in the case of the light and darkness, which are same principle principles manifest, in the case of light and darkness, which are the same thing. The difference consists of varying degrees between the two poles of phenomenon. Where does darkness leave off and light begin? What is the difference between large and small, between hard and soft, between black and white, between sharp and dull, between noise and quiet, between high and low, between positive and negative. The principle of polarity explains these paradoxes, and no other principle can supersede it. The same principle operates on the mental plane. Let us take a radical extreme example, that of the love and hate, two mental states apparently totally different, and yet there are degrees of hate and degrees of love, and a middle point in which we use the terms like or dislike, which shade into each other so gradually that sometimes we are at a loss to know whether we like or dislike or neither. And all are simply degrees of the same thing, as you will see if you will but think a moment. And more than this, and considered of more importance by the Hermetists, it is possible to change the vibrations of hate to the vibrations of love in one's own mind and in the minds of others. Many of you who read these lines have had personal experiences of the involuntary rapid transition from love to hate, and the reverse in your own case and that in others, and you will therefore realize the possibility of this being accomplished by the use of the will, by means of the Hermetic formulas. Good and evil are but poles of the same thing, and the Hermeticist understands the art of transmuting evil into good by means of the application of the principle of polarity. In short, the art of polarization becomes a phase of mental alchemy known and practiced by the ancients and modern Hermetic masters. An understanding of the principle will enable one to change his own polarity, as well as that of others, if he will devote the time and study necessary to master the art. 5. The principle of rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. The Kybalion. This principle embodies the truth that everything there is manifested, a measured motion, a to and fro, a flow and inflow, a swing backward and inward and forward, and pendulum-like movement, a tide-like ebb and flow, a high tide and low tide between the two poles which exist in accordance with the principle of polarity described a moment ago. There was always an action and a reaction, an advance and a retreat, a rising and sinking. This is in the affairs of the universe, suns, worlds, men, animals, minds, energy, and matter. This law is manifest in the creation and destruction of worlds, in the rise and fall of nations, and the life of all things, and finally in the mental states of man. And it is with this latter that the Hermeticists find the understanding of the principle most important. The Hermeticists have grasped the principle, finding its universal application, and have also discovered certain means to overcome the effects in themselves by the use of the appropriate formulas and methods. They apply the mental law of neutralization. They cannot annul the principle or cause it to cease its operation, but they have learned how to grasp its effects upon themselves to a certain degree, depending upon the mastery of the principle. They have learned how to use it instead of being used by it. In this and similar methods consists the art of the Hermeticist. The master of Hermetics polarizes himself at the point at which he desires to rest, and then neutralizes the rhythmic swing of the pendulum which would tend to carry him to the other pole. All individuals who have attained any degree of self-mastery do this to a certain degree, more or less unconsciously, but the master does this consciously, and by the use of this will, and attains a degree of poise and mental firmness almost impossible of belief on the part of the masses, who are swung backward and forward like a pendulum. This principle and that of polarity have been closely studied by the Hermetists, and the methods of counteracting, neutralizing, and using them form an important part of the Hermetic mental alchemy. 6. The principle of cause and effect. Every cause has an effect. Every effect has a cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for a law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. The Kybalion. This principle embodies the fact that there is a cause for every effect, an effect from every cause. It explains that everything happens according to law, and nothing ever merely happens, that there is no such thing as chance, that while there are various planes of cause and effect, the higher dominating the lower planes, still nothing ever entirely escapes the law. The Hermetist understands the art and methods of rising above the ordinary plane of cause and effect to a certain degree, and by mentally rising to a higher plane, they become causes instead of effects. The masses of people are carried along, obedient to environment, the wills and desires of others stronger than themselves, heredity, suggestion, and other outward causes moving them about like pawns on the chessboard of life. But the masters rising to the plane above dominate their moods, characters, qualities, and powers, as well as environmental surrounding them, and become movers instead of pawns. They help play the game of life instead of being played and moved about by the wills of their environment. They use the Hermetic principle of being its tools. The masters obey the causation of the higher planes, but they help to rule on their plane. In this statement there is condensed a wealth of Hermetic knowledge. Let him read who can. 7. The principle of gender. Gender is everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principle. Gender manifests on all planes. The Kybalion. This principle embodies the truth that there is a gender manifested in everything. The masculine and feminine principles were ever at work. This is true not only on the physical plane, but in the mental and even the spiritual planes. On the physical plane, the principle manifests as sex. On the higher planes, it takes higher forms. But the principle was ever the same. No creation, physical, mental, or spiritual, is possible without this principle. An understanding of its laws will throw light on many subjects that have perplexed the minds of men. The principle of gender works ever in the direction of generation, regeneration, and creation. Everything and every person contains the two elemental principles, or this great principle within it, him or her. Every male thing has a female element. Also, every female contains also the male principle. If you would understand the philosophy of the mental and spiritual creation, generation, and regeneration, you must understand and study this Hermetic principle. It contains the solution of many mysteries of life. We caution you that this principle has no reference to the many base, pernicious, and degrading lustful theories, teachings, and practices which are taught under the fanciful titles and are which the prostitution of the great natural principle of gender. Such base rivalries of the ancient infamous forms of phallicism tend to ruin the mind, body, and soul, and the Hermetic philosophy has ever sounded the warning note against these degraded teachings, which tend towards lust, licentiousness, and perversion of nature's principles. If you seek these teachings, you must go elsewhere. For them, Hermeticism contains nothing for you along these lines. To the pure, all things are pure. To the base, all things are base. Chapter 3. Mental transmutation. Mind, as well as metals and elements, may be transmuted from state to state, degree to degree, condition to condition, pole to pole, vibration to vibration. True Hermetic transmutation is a mental art. The Kybalion. As we stated, the Hermetists were the original alchemists, astrologers, and psychologists. Hermes, having been the founder of these schools of thought, from astrology has grown modern astronomy. From alchemy has grown modern chemistry. From the mystic psychology has grown modern psychology of the schools. But it must not be supposed that the ancients were ignorant of that which the modern schools suppose to be their own exclusion of the special property. The records engraved on the stones of ancient Egypt show conclusively that the ancients had a full comprehensive knowledge of astronomy and very and very building of the pyramids, showing the connection between the design and the study of astronomical science. Nor were they ignorant of chemistry, for the fragments of the ancient writings show that they were acquainted with the chemical properties of things. In fact, the ancient theories regarding physics are being slowly verified by the latest discoveries of modern science, notably those related to the constitution of matter. Nor must it be supposed that they were ignorant of the so-called modern discoveries in psychology. On the contrary, the Egyptians were especially skilled in the science of psychology, particularly in branches of the modern schools ignore, but which, nevertheless, are being uncovered under the name of psychic science, which is perplexing by psychologists of today, and making them reluctantly admit that there may be something in it after all. The truth is that beneath the material chemistry, astronomy, and psychology, that is, the psychology in its phase of brain action, the ancients possessed a knowledge of transcendental astronomy, called astrology, of transcendental chemistry, called alchemy, of transcendental psychology, called mystic psychology. They possessed the inner knowledge as well as the outer knowledge, the latter alone being possessed by modern scientists. Among the many secret branches of knowledge possessed by the Hermetists was that known as mental transmutation, which forms the subject matter of this lesson. Transmutation is a term usually employed to designate the ancient art of transmutation of metals, particularly of the base metals, into gold. The word transmute means to change from one nature, form, or substance into another, to transform. Webster. And accordingly, mental transmutation means the art of changing or transforming mental states, forms, and conditions into others. So you may see that mental transmutation is the art of mental chemistry, if you like the term, a form of practical mystic psychology. But this means far more than appears on the surface. Transmutation, alchemy, or chemistry on the mental plane is important enough in its effect to be sure, and if the art stopped there, it would still be one most important branches of study known to man. But this is only the beginning. Let us see why. The first of the seven Hermetic principles, in the principle of mentalism, the axiom of which is the all is mind, the universe is mental, which means that the underlying reality of the universe is mind, and the universe itself is mental, that is, existing in the mind of the all. We shall consider that the principle in succeeding lessons, but let us see the effect of the principle if it is assumed to be true. If the universe is mental in its nature, then mental transmutation must be the art of changing the conditions of the universe along the lines of matter, force, and mind. So you see, therefore, that mental transmutation is really the magic of which the ancient writers had so much to say in their mystical works, and about which they gave so few practical instructions. If all be mental, then the art which enables one to transmute mental conditions must render the master the control of the material conditions as well as those in the ordinarily called mental. As a matter of fact, none but advanced mental alchemists have been able to attain the degree of power necessary to control the grosser physical conditions, such as to control the elements of nature, the production of sensations of tempests, the production of sensations of earthquakes, and other great physical phenomena. But that such men have existed and do exist today is a matter of earnest belief to all advanced occultists of all schools. That the masters exist and have these powers, the best teachers assure their students, having had experience which justify them in such beliefs and statements. These masters do not make public exhibitions of their powers, but seek seclusion from the crowds of men in order to better work their way along the path of attainment. We mention their existence at this point merely to call your attention to the fact that their power is entirely mental, and operates along the lines of the higher mental transmutation of the Hermetic principle of mentalism. The universe is mental. The Kybalion. But students and hermetists of a lesser degree than masters, the initiates and teachers, are able to freely work along the mental plane in mental transmutation. In fact, all that we call psychic phenomena, mental influence, mental science, new thought phenomena, etc., operate along the same general lines, for there is but one principle involved, no matter by what name the phenomena is called. The student and practitioner of mental transmutation works among the mental plane, transmutating mental conditions, states, etc. into others according to various formulas, more or less efficacious. The various treatments, affirmations, denials, etc. of the schools of mental science are but formulas, often quite imperfect and unscientific, of hermetic art. The majority of modern practitioners are quite ignorant compared to ancient masters, for they lack the fundamental knowledge upon which the work is based. Not only may the mental states, etc., of oneself be changed or transmuted by hermetic methods, but also the states of others may be and are constantly transmutated in the same way, usually unconsciously, by often consciously, by some understanding the laws of principles in cases where people affected are not informed of the principle of self-protection. And more than this, as many students and practitioners of modern mental science know, every material condition depending upon the minds of other people may be changed or transmuting in accordance with the earnest desire, will, and treatment of persons desiring changed conditions of life. The public are so generally informed regarding these things at present that we do not deem it necessary to mention the same at length. It's a new book, sorry. Our purpose at this point being merely to show the hermetic principle and art underlying all of these various forms of practice, good and evil, for the force can be used in opposite directions according to the hermetic principle of polarity. In this little book, we shall state the basic principles of mental transmutation, that all who read may grasp the underlying principles and thus possess the master key that will unlock the many doors of her principle of polarity. We shall now proceed to the consideration of the first of the Hermetic seven principles, the principle of mentalism, in which is explained the truth that the all is mind, the universe is mental. In the words and the Kybalion, we ask the close attention and careful study of the great principle on the part of our students, for it is really the basic principle of the whole Hermetic philosophy and the Hermetic art of mental transmutation.